Hello, welcome to my channel. It's Wiley here, and today we're going to look at the recent interview between Sam Bankman-Fried and Andrew Ross Storkin on the recent FTX scandal. This is going to be a different video because we're going to psychoanalyze Sam as he goes through this interview process, which seems very like MK Ultra-ish if you really look at it. He's like shaking and sweating and looking all nervous. So let's take a look and see how he does. And we will be pausing in certain segments just to analyze his reaction and to try to psychoanalyze the situation. So let's get started.
Please welcome back to the stage, Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for staying for the entire day so that we can do what I think may be one of the most important interviews we will do today. In the span of about 1 week, Sam Bankman-Fried went from a billionaire, the white knight of the crypto world, and running one of the largest exchanges, to what some people think has become a wanted man. FTX was once valued at $32 billion. It's now effectively worthless in bankruptcy. We're going to talk about that and whether investors will ever get money back. There are multiple billions owed to creditors and big questions. In the wake of the collapse, Bitcoin fell.
The truth is, the money was never there to begin with. He was just printing FTF tokens out of the blue, like the Federal Reserve printing money. So if anything, it just went poof. And some of it probably stolen, definitely, whatever it's remaining, built on top of collateral and all that.
To its lowest price in 2 years, and on Monday, BlockFi, which had been bailed out by FTX, filed for bankruptcy. The rapid fall of this empire has left so many questions about crypto, about the future of it, and whether it can be trusted again. Sam Bankman-Fried joins us right now, live from the Bahamas. Sam, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate your willingness to have this conversation. As I said at the outset of
Look
today,
at him, he's coming in all sweet and innocent, smiling. Yeah, whatever.
That need to be asked and also need to be answered. As you know, a lot of people have been hurt, genuinely hurt. And my hope is that over the time we have together, that we can have a candid conversation about what happened, how it happened. There are people who are angry, and they are seeking answers. I just want everybody in the audience to know.
Yes, the people are angry. You want to know why? Because he should be in jail. These questions should be answered in court behind a judge. Why is he still here doing an exclusive interview for the New York Times? It makes no sense, but we all know. We know.
That I received thousands of letters and emails, even in the past couple of days, from a lot of these people who feel like they're victims. And some of them have questioned whether we should have this conversation, whether we should have this interview. There are people who don't believe that this conversation should happen. And I just want to say that I think our job as journalists is to have those conversations, is
What a joke.
to ask those questions and seek those answers on behalf of the public. And that is especially true right now.
And just so you know, if you look at Andrew Ross Storkin's eyes, they're like two different colors. And one eye almost looks reptilian to me, but it's late night. I could be crazy. But if anyone else sees that, put it in the comments.
Sam, here's where I want to start this conversation, if we could. I think at this point there are two ways to view what has happened at FTX. And I know we'll get into all of the details in a moment. But I'm just going to go very basic. There's a generous view. And the generous view is that you are a young man who made a series of terrible...
He is not a young man. He is a 30-year-old grown man, almost 31, living in the Bahamas in a penthouse with plenty of money. He's far from a child. I mean, look at him. Like, he's like, I can't even. Let's keep going.
Terrible, very, very bad decisions. The less generous view is that you have committed a massive fraud, that this is a Ponzi scheme, a manipulation of the system. And I want to start there because I think that there are so many people who have that question, which is, what is this? And what did happen?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me. And
Well, okay, he puts his hands up like that. I mean, you got me. Let me explain. I'm looking at body language as well. I'll be analyzing whatever my brain can pick up. So let's continue, and thank you for your patience.
and at the end of the day, I was CEO of FTX, and that means whatever happened, wherever it happened, I had a duty. I had a duty to all of our stakeholders, to our customers, our creditors. I had a duty to our employees.
Notice he says stakeholders first. The duty is to the customers first, but that's a whole nother conversation.
our investors, and to the regulators in the world, to do right by them, to make sure the right things happen to the company. And clearly, I didn't do a good job of that. Clearly, I made a lot of mistakes or things I would give anything to be able to do over again. I didn't ever try to commit fraud on anyone. I was excited about the prospects of FTX a month ago. I saw it as a thriving, growing business. I was shocked by what happened this month, and reconstructing it. Where are there things I wish I had done differently?
Well, let's talk.
Yeah, he wishes he covered up his tracks a little bit more and, had a fail safe. But, Bitcoin, you can't beat it.
Talk about some of the things you would want to have done differently. But I don't want this to be an abstraction for folks, because it's a lot of big numbers and often doesn't feel human. One of the letters I got, I want to read to you, Sam, because it's from a gentleman who said that he lost his life savings. And the subject line is, Sam Bankman-Fried stole $2 million from me. It says, Andrew, can you please ask SBF why he decided to steal my life savings and the $10 billion more from customers to give to his hedge fund?
You notice he actually smirked a little bit. He was like when he heard that, he smirked. It's probably true.
Alameda. Can you ask him why his hedge fund was leveraging long all of these S coins? I'm going to keep it polite for the kids. Please ask him if he thinks what happened was fraud. These are the kinds of letters that I've been getting repeatedly over the past several days. What do you tell this man?
Yeah. I mean, I'm deeply sorry about what happened. Here's, the long and short of what happened. And I'll start by saying, just to make a distinction here, you look at the US platform, you look at the international platform. The US platform is a US regulated platform with American users. To my knowledge, that's fully solvent, that's fully funded. And, I believe that withdrawals could be opened up today and everyone could be made whole from that none of these problems plagued the US platform. Then you look at the international platform,
He's selling hope there. This U.S. platform, everyone made whole. How long will that take? Mount Gox years?
For their non-US users. And as the letter says, Alameda Research did have a long position. And the international platform, it's a margin trading platform, it's a derivatives platform. It's a platform where all the clients were, going on, placing something as collateral and using that to put on a position, whether that's a futures position, a spot position, a borrow. And what the exchange was storing was the collateral from all of those positions. Alameda Research was, one of those that put on positions there. And as I try and reconstruct this, over the last month, I have limited access to data, but my view of it, from what I have been able.
He talks a lot about reconstructing things in his head. I guess that's his way of like analyzing and like putting everything like on the board and making adjustments and tweaks. But we'll see how that comes out forward later in the interview.
We'll see is roughly that, basically, look, a year ago, Alameda had, I think, something like 10% leverage, had something like 10 times the assets of the position that it had on. Over the course of the last year, there were a number of market crashes that drove the value of those assets down and the leverage up. I think it was, to my knowledge, still under 2x leverage, as of a month ago. You look at what happened this month, and in a few days, all out, PR assault, which led to a total market collapse in a pretty short period of time, no bid-side liquidity. I think more than $10 billion wiped off in the matter of days. And realistically speaking, no ability for FTX to be able to liquidate that position and generate everything that was owed from it.
But I think the bigger question is where Alameda got the loan from,
Yep.
Which is to say that there is a view that this is about commingling of funds.
Right.
And in that letter that I just read you, this gentleman actually copy and pasted the terms of service for FTX into the email. And I just want to read you this. It says, none of the digital assets in your account are the property of or shall or may be loaned to FTX Trading. FTX Trading does not represent or treat digital assets in users' accounts as belonging to FTX Trading. So how is it possible that Alameda had this loan of such a large size?
So there's that piece from the terms of service, but there were a number of other parts of the terms of service and a number of other parts of the platform on top of that. There is the borrow lending facility, where users were lending billions of dollars of assets to each other, collateralized by assets on the exchange. You had obviously futures contracts where there are leveraged positions on. Now, of course, all of this, it's meant to be the case that these are positions where FTX could, if it needed to, margin
Right here, he's starting to shake.
call those positions and close them down in time such that it would cover all of those, all those shorts, all those liabilities. Obviously, that wasn't the case here, and that's a massive failure of oversight, of risk management, and of diffusion of responsibility from myself running FTX.
But just make this very straight. Was there commingling of funds? That's what it appears like. It appears like there's been a
He just licked his lips too. It could be a dry mouth due to the medications he may be on, allegedly. I have to say allegedly so I don't get sued by SBS that apparently has no money.
a genuine commingling of the funds that are of FTX custody.
Yeah, it's like licking those lips, like a little dry. Hold on, let me think of a lie.
That were not supposed to be commingled with your separate firm.
I didn't knowingly commingle funds. And again, one piece of this, you have the margin trading. You have, customers borrowing from each other. Alameda is one of those. I was frankly surprised by how big Alameda's position was, which points to another failure of oversight on my part, and failure to appoint someone to be chiefly in charge of that. I
think he was just having like a lot of fun of like printing a lot of money and like giving it away and trying to bail out the crypto community. Like he knew exactly how much money he had trying to bail out Southeast.
wasn't trying to commingle funds.
Let me ask you this. The Wall Street Journal reported that Carolyn Ellison told Alameda staffers that Alameda used FTX client funds to cover loans that were being recalled because of the Luna-triggered credit crunch.
I wish Caroline could be interviewed, but we won't hear a peep from her. Man, I would love to get her on and analyze that.
Carolyn says that she, Sam, Gary were aware of this. How do you square that with what you originally said over Twitter, that this was an $8 billion accounting mistake?
So I'll point to two things. And first of all, obviously, I don't know what anyone else is thinking here. I can only talk about it from what I know, from what I knew. And a lot of this is reconstructing it over the last month. I have limited access to data, but what it seems like happened is in the middle of the year, a lot of, most of the borrow lending desks in the space blew out or closed down. And it seems like
It's starting to shake. So I noticed that you want to pay attention to what he says while he's shaking his leg, and which is also shaking his arm because his arm is on his leg. But I noticed he was perfectly still for like the more lighter question. But as the questions get harder, he does get a little nervous and starts like the leg shaking, which I see.
Alameda had, margin positions opened with them, and that it likely moved a bunch of that over to FTX this year when they shut down. And that means, I think it was over collateralized positions, but positions that involve substantial size and substantial US dollar size on the borrow side. In terms of the accounting mistake, again, looking through what happened, I think that there is a substantial discrepancy between what the financials were, what the audited financials were, the true financials, what the exchange understood. All of that was consistent, versus what the dashboards that we had displayed for Alameda's account there, which substantially under-displayed the size of that position. And so that's one of the reasons that I was surprised when we dug into everything at how big that position had become.
Okay, so that was total BS and like word salad. Like that, if you are to rewind maybe like a minute, that whole paragraph that he just spat out was just word salad. It made no sense.
But you would agree that there is a much more closely connected version of FTX International and Alameda than previously understood. Fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, given the size of the position, I think it was, if not in intention, it was in effect tied together substantially more than I would have ever wanted it to be.
So you did an interview earlier this summer with Bloomberg, and you were asked about the connection between Alameda and FTX, and you said that obviously came from the same place, because it started that way,
Yep.
and the same original people, but most of the remaining nexuses, you said, have dropped off.
Yep.
I know the people from Alameda decently well, almost as if you don't know what's happening there, and there isn't like a large amount, of ways remain that we are actively working together. Anything like that. Alameda is a wholly separate entity. They're different offices, like different principal offices. We don't have any shared personnel. We're also not the same company. We not all are under the same corporate umbrella or anything like that. And yet it seems like Alameda people were living in the same penthouse where you may very well be right now, all together.
Yeah, they were allegedly all living in a nice penthouse in the Bahamas, like allegedly doing like inappropriate things, like young people with a lot of money would do, typical. So
Most of Alameda was not there. I don't live there now, but not there now. Have not lived there.
oh, that's interesting. So there, he's like, oh, I don't live there now. I have not lived there. I don't live there. Like he's trying to like convince himself that he hasn't been back to that place. Or there's something that's just like a lot of emotional ties to it. So it was interesting.
For much of the time. But I did live with one or two
And his shoulders also tensed up too.
members of Alameda for a little while. And I'll also say that, as I was, earlier this summer, looking at the relationship,
Shaking.
and this is a pretty big mistake and oversight of mine, I was viewing it primarily from the trading volume perspective, because that's what drives our revenue. And so when I was looking at how intertwined are FTX and Alameda, I was looking at, well, what fraction of trading volume, what fraction of liquidity.
Okay, so he's dodging the whole like question of why all of the FTX employees and Alameda employees were chilling out and living in this place. So
On the platform does Alameda represent? That had
has nothing to do with volume or what's going on the markets and technical analysis.
fallen off from something like 45% in 2019 to something like 2% this year. But in terms of positions and balances, it was a much larger fraction. I hadn't been looking at that. That's a pretty big
But
oversight.
Sam, I think the
Wow, he totally dodged that question, and Andrew's gonna push on that.
question is whether you were supposed to have access to these accounts to begin with. If I worked at a bank and was a bank teller,
Yep.
and I decided to leave the bank at the end of the evening and take the cash that I ostensibly had access to, even if I intended to bring it back to the bank later, even with more money to give them back, I still stole the money.
I mean, look, I wasn't running Alameda. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I didn't know the size of their position. A lot of these are things I've learned over the last month that I learned as I was sort of frantically digging into this on November 6th, November 7th, November 8th. Obviously that's a pretty big mistake on Mark. That's a pretty big oversight that I wasn't more aware. I think I was scared of. I was nervous because
He wasn't aware of all at all. I think he was probably allegedly just kind of drugged up, kind of like, just going through the motions at that point.
of the conflict of interest about being too involved. Obviously that
Shaking.
shouldn't have meant that I didn't have real oversight, and it really shouldn't have meant that I failed to point.
And he's
anyone.
starting to get a little flustered in the face. His face is getting a little flushed, just a little bit, like maybe sweaty, a little reddish. Because when he started, he was a little pale, but now he's got some color. He's got to think a lot for this one. Gotta rush all that blood to the brain.
To be in charge of that oversight, that relationship. But I haven't been running Alameda. I haven't been, thinking about its finances. I haven't been, making those decisions. But as CEO of FTX, it was still my duty to make
But you
sure that
owned it.
someone was doing diligence. I was a large owner of it. That is true, and had a lot of exposure on that side. But
So
I
why
wasn't
wouldn't you
running.
have been focused on it if in fact that's actually where the profits were?
Well, I don't know that that's where, I think Alameda had made trading profits over the last few years, but FTX had made profits as well. FTX had been a profitable growing business. And that was more than a full-time job. I didn't have the bandwidth to run two companies at once. I didn't have the attention for it. And again, I was nervous about a conflict of interest between those two, and so was pretty intentional about not being very involved in what was happening at Alameda.
When did the commingling of assets begin?
So, and again, lots of traders had open margin positions on FTX where they would have borrows of assets, where they would be short some asset against, against other assets as collateral. That being said, again, looking through this now.
Shoulders tensed up. He like, I don't know, he does kind of act like an adolescent teenager, kind of ridiculous. Like I saw him in the office, a picture of him in the office, like sleeping on a beanbag, leaning back, like he was like about to go to the hospital for dehydration. It was kind of crazy. Like, wow.
I think that position size for Alameda got substantially larger over the course of 2022, and that it was, I think, substantially larger by October of 2022, probably by July of 2022 than it had been in April.
But it sounds like it's fair to say that there was always a connection between Alameda and FTX, and almost, I mean, not almost, but from the very, very beginning, and then it never really stopped.
Well, I think it had been, in some ways, reducing. I mean, when you scroll back to 2019, Alameda and FTX were very connected in a number of ways. One of these was that Alameda was the primary liquidity provider on FTX. It was, 40-something% of volume. It was the backstop liquidity provider. And you scroll forward to 2022, it was down to 2% of volume. We had a lot of backstop liquidity providers, but it still had a big margin position on. And I was failing to pay nearly enough attention to positions and positional risk on the exchange, and to Alameda's in particular. And
Shaking
I also, frankly, made a
hard.
mistake that I feel pretty embarrassed to have made. I mean, a lot of these are, but I substantially underestimated what the scale of a market crash could look like and what the speed of it could look like, and how correlated it would be.
But that just suggests that you were.
Yeah, like, so I think he went to college for like what, chemistry? He's not even really like a finance guy. Maybe just like being able to like move numbers around and deal with accounts, but interesting.
Just hoping, perhaps hoping against hope, that this would all work out and that nobody therefore would realize what this commingling was all about?
So it's not how I viewed it. And in particular, again, most of the firms had margin positions. Most of the firms had borrows on FTX. The problem here, this was too big. I was surprised by the size of what it was.
But it's not just too big. It's assets that, look, it sounds like there were assets that may have been allowable to.
Was he drinking that like carbonated flavored water or something, like a vegan drink? You better be vegan.
Be loaned. But then there were assets that weren't allowable to be loaned, no?
So
he's like, yeah, I needed that. And you see a little drip on his chin. Oh man, he can't even drink out of a can. Jesus Christ. That's worse than I thought. Oh god. Like, how do you drink out of a can and like drip it on your like? I mean, on TV, you're a grown ass man. Like, you're not a damn child. Like, that's crazy.
I'm still looking into the details.
He doesn't even wipe it off. Oh my god, see the drip on the, I guess, right side? It's just like, that's gonna bother me. How long is that gonna be there? Like, with me?
Of some pieces of this, but I do think that in addition to what I had seen is sort of law of the standard borrows here.
Oh wow.
That when you scroll
Sam Bankman-Drool! That's gonna be perfect! Sam Bankman-Drool!
back to 20.
Hold on, I need to figure out what. Okay, it's at 19 minutes in. Okay. Y'all get that one.
18, or to 2019, I guess. FTX didn't have bank accounts. It didn't have any bank accounts globally. We were trying to get them. It took us a while, took us a few years. And there are customers who wanted to wire money to FTX. And so I think in the meantime, some of them were wiring money to Alameda Research to get credited on FTX. And I think that was a substantial sum. And I think that the FTX's internal accounting did correctly, effectively try to debit Alameda for those funds, but it didn't happen in the primary account. And so it didn't happen, it created a discrepancy between the display of the account and what was really going on there. And I'm still looking into exactly how that worked mechanically. But that did make that position size substantially larger than I thought, and I think then what you would have gotten
Word
from,
salad. I know word
from
salad
boosting
when
all
I hear it.
What do you make of the argument that Alameda was used to effectively wash money into FTX, that American investors who, by the way,
Oh, look, it's like, what do I say? What do I say? He's like, I see him looking further out into the camera. Like maybe someone's in the room trying to like coach him through. I'm not sure, but this is very MK Ultra-ish.
we're not technically allowed to even invest on FTX, we're doing so, and FTX was doing it knowingly because the know your customer rules were being flouted by using this separate vehicle.
How would that allow customers to flout the know your customer rules? Are you talking about people who are trading on FTX US, or are you talking about customers of FTX International?
International, you just said that there was money being sent to Alameda and that Alameda was then providing credits onto FTX.
Right. But those users still had to go through the know your customer policy on FTX in order to do that. In order to use that ramp, customers still...
I want to say that when FTX first came out, there was no know your customer policy. People were just signing up and doing leverage trading. Like, people just signed up. You could be like 14, sign up, and then like just send some Bitcoin that you got and start trading, like there was no know your customer at all, like on FTX. So this is all BS.
Had to go through FTX's normal KYC onboarding.
So when do you think you knew there was a problem?
So the time that I really knew there was a problem was November 6th. November 6th was, that was the date that the tweet about FTT came out. And by late on November 6th, we were putting together all of the data, putting together all the information that obviously I should have put together way earlier, that obviously should have been part of the dashboards I was always looking at. And
here he just feels a little regret because, his lie just got slipped up. That's like, if only I saw this one, maybe that would have postponed things even down further. But FTX, it was definitely going down the drain anyway. Crappy token.
We looked at that. There was a potential serious problem there. And Alameda's position was big on FTX. It had just taken a huge hit. It had taken hits over the course of the year, but that was a particularly, large and one and very abrupt. And we're seeing a run on the bank start, and that was leading to, $4 billion a day of client withdrawals. At that point, we started calling prospective, sources of financing because I was nervous about what was going to happen there. If you rewind even a few days, I was a little bit nervous, but not on nearly the same scale. And I was thinking about, risks that were substantially less.
When you say you were nervous, you were nervous the company was going to go under, you were nervous you were going to get caught. What were you nervous about?
On November 6th or before then?
Either.
What does it matter?
I think before then, what I was nervous about was that basically and this started, I would say, November 2nd or so, when there was, Alameda balance sheet, through CoinDesk, and when I started to think a bit more about this, I was nervous that that would lead to substantial losses for Alameda, and that it would be a bit messy. I didn't think it was existential for FTX. I didn't think it was going to lead to a massive
Existential.
loss for FTX's customers. I was thinking of this as more like Alameda is going to be really tight on funds, and that maybe it would end up having some small impact on FTX, but not a significant one, not one that hurt customers at all. When you're talking about November 6th, late November 6th, then, and especially as we bleed into November 7th and 8th, I start to become nervous that FTX is not going to be able to fill customer withdrawals. And by late November 6th, I am very nervous about that, and I'm starting to think about emergency scenarios, and I'm starting to think about things might end quite badly here, and the core metric that I'm thinking of there is, will we be able to make sure all customers are whole? And on November 5th, I was feeling quite good about that. On November 7th, I was feeling quite uneasy about that.
I want to go back in time for a moment. This summer,
About making the customers hold. Anyone that's watching this that had their money in FTX, they should have known better. Not your keys, not your crypto. And this could be like a decade long litigation. It's not gonna happen tomorrow. You're not gonna get your money in a year, maybe not even 2 years, and by that time the whole system would have crashed, and we'll be on CBDCs and all that crap. So there's no telling when you'll get that.
you were described oftentimes as the J.P. Morgan of crypto, referencing the 1907 panic that he helped prevent. And you had purchased BlockFi.
With JP Morgan, at least the FEC and stuff regulated them and took them to court for certain issues.
We're making investments in Voyager and all sorts of other things. When you were doing that at that time, how much of that was an effort to prop up the value of things like FTT, which was the token of FTX?
Okay, I wanted to talk about the FTT token. I was thinking about buying it, but then when I saw that chart, real technical traders, especially in crypto, know when a chart is manipulated. That joint looked manipulated as F. It's crazy. Just go look back at the FTT token and look how the technical analysis was. It was just so predictably manipulated the way it was moving.
That if a company like BlockFi, which owned a ton of it, that if it collapsed, FTT would collapse, and in large part, the quote-unquote collateral that you had for Alameda would collapse.
So I don't think any of the borrow lending desks, to my knowledge, owned a lot of FTT. I think a lot of them, may have been using it as collateral, or taking it as collateral. I don't think they owned it though, or were going to sell it. And I think that most of them ended up closing down effectively all of their lines with Alameda one way or another. And so at that point, I think that was close to a sunk cost. And so I wasn't viewing it as having any impact on FTT in particular. I did view it as important for the industry's health. I did view it as a thing where I wanted to try to keep the industry stable. But I don't think it had any, really large FTT-specific impact.
And did it have it? You didn't think it had any impact? It would have had no impact on Alameda or FTX if, for example, BlockFi were to have failed?
I don't think it would have had large direct impact. And the reason I say that is that I believe that Alameda ended up returning the vast majority of its open, borrows of its margin positions with the borrow lending desks in the middle of this year anyway. And so at that point, there wasn't that much left to save from that. At that point, I think the bigger thing was just not wanting the industry to implode.
Let's talk about collateral, because I think this entire experience
He's like, oh, I need a drink for this one.
What might be collateral.
Now, what's in this cup? So he's got that canned drink, whatever the hell that is, that he dripped on his face. Now this, I want to know what's in this white cup. Is this the MK Ultra juice that's going to make him super focused for the collateralized questions?
Clearly, you were using FTT and Solana
He
and
almost
other
dripped it.
tokens as collateral, and part of that required you to mark them in a specific way, a value to them.
Yep.
Do you think that you were marking them properly?
In Alameda's case, I don't think I was marking them the way I wish I had from a risk perspective. And I want to sort of differentiate here, like expected value or sort of like worth or something like that from security. And, I think that I don't have any strong statements to make about, what value they're assigned from sort of like, a upside perspective or even a median case perspective. But clearly I was not nearly cautious enough from a downside perspective, from an extreme downside perspective. And, I can tell you in my head, I was looking at a 30% down move over a few day period as a sort of like extreme
Sounds
tail
about
case
right.
event that, we had seen once before. And then, what happened here was a 95% down move over the course of a year, and a 60% down move over a few day period with very little liquidity, and all happening at once in all of these coins in a correlated fashion, in which hedges didn't mean as much also because this was a specific crash on assets associated with Alameda Research rather than all assets. And so, even correlated hedges had limited use there, and a run on the bank at the same time. And all of that are things, in retrospect, I should have expected might happen in an extreme scenario because that's how markets work. And, we've seen other examples of that in history where when things get really bad, they get really bad for all of the relevant things at once in a very direct and correlated and quick way.
I want to go back to the BlockFi acquisition for a moment. How much money do you think Alameda, I'd said that they had a lot of FTT, but that Alameda had borrowed from BlockFi at the time of the bailout?
I honestly don't know, but I would have guessed like 100 million, maybe a couple $100 million, but I honestly don't know the answer to that. I wasn't like running on, I wasn't paying detailed attention. That's my guess.
And were you using FTT and Serum and other things to collateralize the loans at BlockFi, do you think? I mean, this goes to the whole idea of both the value of these things and also whether you were trying to buy BlockFi, in fact, to continue to support effectively Alameda or FTX.
Right. Yeah, what's that all
It
about?
might be. I would guess it was, but to your point, my guess is that like the amount paid for BlockFi was probably bigger than the amount that Alameda had opened with it. I don't know that for sure. Again, but I wasn't even looking at what that number was really. But I think that's about right.
I want to go back to the Alameda piece of it for just another moment, if you'd stick with me here. You had told investors and regulators that you were not.
I don't know.
involved in
I think he
Alameda
should have been
decision-making.
looking at those numbers.
And yet,
Because he was literally trying to bail out like Celsius and stuff. Like, That's crazy. Where'd he get the money from? Like,
In the case, Alameda invested $1.15 billion in Genesis digital assets without your consultation or approval. That's the question. And my understanding is you also served on the board of Genesis Digital Assets. And so I'm trying to understand how you wouldn't have been involved with Alameda.
So I was somewhat involved with venture investing, and that was done out of a separate entity than any of Alameda's proprietary trading, than its activity on FTX or other crypto exchanges. But I was consulted on some of its VC investments, including with GDA.
What are your lawyers telling you right now?
yeah, that's what I want to
Are they suggesting
know.
this is a good idea for you to be speaking?
No.
Very much not. I mean, the classic advice, right? Don't say anything. Recede into a hole.
I hate that though. Like, he should literally be like in jail or at least in U.S. court right now. But everyone's just laughing and it's very theatrical. Yeah, I guess that's where we're headed now. Like, the Overton window has moved over. So next time someone steals your money from a large institution that's supposed to be back, they could just laugh about it. Oh, I don't know. I was feeling young and hyped up. It's just happened.
And it's not going.
And this is all political theater. Like, this is the more time that goes on, the more charade like this, nothing will happen. That's for sure.
I mean, it's not who I want to be. I don't have. I think I have a duty to talk to people. I have a duty to explain what happened, and I think I have a duty to do everything I can to try and do what's right. If there is anything I can do to try and help customers out here, and I don't see what good is accomplished by me just sitting locked, in a room pretending the outside world doesn't exist.
You're in the Bahamas right now. Are you in the Bahamas because you think you can't leave?
Yeah, tell her.
I'm in the Bahamas. I have been in the Bahamas for the last year, and I've been running FTX from the Bahamas.
He puts his hands up again, like, oh, you got me. Oh, not again.
FTX Digital Market, our primary operating entity down here, with
Shaking.
with, Bahamian regulators and and others in contact, and right now I'm looking to be helpful anywhere I can with any of the global entities that that would want my help.
Do you think you could come to the United States or go elsewhere?
To my knowledge, I could.
Have you thought about doing that?
I've thought about it, and I mean, I've seen a lot of the obviously a lot of the hearings that have been happening. I would not be surprised if sometime I am up there talking about what happened to our representatives, or wherever else is most appropriate.
How concerned are you about criminal liability at this point?
So I don't think that. I mean, obviously, I don't personally think that I have.
Oh.
But I think the real answer is that's not. It sounds weird to say, but I think the real answer is that's not what I'm focusing on. It's there's going to be a time and a place for me to.
He's not focusing on it because nothing's going to happen to him. He's going to stay right in the Bahamas and maybe end up in Dubai or Hong Kong or some else. You know what I mean? Like, he knows he's good. Like, he's not worried about it. So there's your answer. He's not worried about it. About going to jail. Not worried. Sorry. I stole your money. See you later. And practically, if we take ourselves out of this narrative matrix that has been constructed around this is like a RICO charge. This is racketeering and money laundering. This definitely has RICO charge all over it. But because it's so tied to like large institutions, whether it's like as opposed to like the mafia, like small businesses and gaining power that way. Like this is too close to home, so he knows nothing's gonna happen. But this is definitely Rico level shit. Like,
Sort of think about myself and my own future, but I don't think this is it. Like, right now, I mean, look, I've had a bad month. This has not been a fun month.
yeah,
But
I'm sure.
that's not
But what about
matters.
all the people that lost their money? You know, what about the people that put their assets onto this exchange? Like, and it was completely just wiped out. You know, people's savings, you don't know how they got that money, like how hard they worked, and now they have to totally like backtrack on everything. And a lot of these people aren't living in the Bahamas, chilling like you are. So like, this isn't funny at all. Like, it's crazy how like, no offense, but like, I'm gonna have to go there. Like, you know, if this was a black man, oh my God, y'all would be lynching this motherfucker. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not all about, you know, all that political mumbo jumbo, but if this was a black man, like Arthur Hayes, they should be treating him like Arthur Hayes equally. So,
Matters here. Like,
in
what
trial.
matters here is the millions of customers. What matters here is all the stakeholders in FTX who got hurt, and trying to do everything I can to help them out. And you know, as long as that's the case, like, I don't think that
Here's my
I don't
sorry.
think that, you know, what happens with me is the important part of that, and I don't
I'm
think that's
sincerely
what it
sorry.
makes sense for me to be focusing on.
Sam, help me with this. On November 7th, you tweeted and then deleted a tweet that said, quote, FTX has enough to cover all client holdings. We don't invest client assets, even treasuries.
Yep.
We've been processing all withdrawals and will continue to be, unquote.
That's
You
a
then
lie.
deleted that tweet. And literally just moments ago, you told me it was on November 7th that things took a turn.
Yep.
You telling the truth?
So things were changing fast, and you know,
He's looking to the left a lot on this one.
when you look at November 6th, I was feeling nervous, but I felt like things were probably going to end up okay. We still had, I mean, you know, assets way larger than liabilities, and yeah, there's increasing withdrawal demand, but we were meeting all of it. We were processing all of it, although it was a weekend, so we were a day delayed on a lot of wire transfers and stablecoin creations, and Bitcoin node was overloaded, but you know, there are assets we were continuing to process.
Don't you hate
By
that?
November 8th, I did not
Overloaded
think
Bitcoin.
the odds were that high that we were going to be able to meet all client demand, and I was worried that there was going to be a substantial liquidity shortfall. November 7th, that was sort of the transition day, and you know, even just the start versus the end of November 7th, I felt fairly different. You know, and I can't remember exactly what I was thinking or when I sent that, but you know, I remember trying to think about, feeling conflicted about what to say, and trying to think about what I could say that I believed. And you know, by not that long later, I no longer believed that. That no longer felt like it had much, like that was a at all reasonable representation of where my mind was at. And I don't remember exactly when I deleted it, but I remember at some point I was like, it shouldn't be there.
Let me ask you a different question, because this is all around the same time. The New York Times reported that $515 million was suspiciously, in quote, transferred from FTX wallets after.
Oh, he's smiling real
bankruptcy
hard for
filing.
the.
And there have been accusations
It's like, oh,
that
I
this
can't
was
believe he's asking this.
the assistance, effectively, of theft. Where did that money go?
So I will caveat this by saying, at that point, I was being cut off from systems. And so I'll give you the answer to the extent that I know it. which is that I believe that a few different things happened within a short period there. I think that the US team took actions to seize some of the assets and put it in custody from the exchange. I believe that it has been announced that the Bahamian regulators took some of the assets into safekeeping as well around that same time. And I think there may have, in addition to both of those, also been some actually improper access of assets on the exchange.
Improper access. Oh man, he's lying to you like right here. Improper access. Just say it was a hack. It was a hack. Okay, like for real.
And I don't know the details of that. I don't have the resources to trace through exactly what happened there. And I don't know who is behind that third part.
Oh, I definitely believe he has like a back door to like all of this. Like I'm sure he's got like a little one master computer that's the back door to like all of this. Like where it can do what it used to do, like to manipulate for future references.
I want to go back to one thing about the Bahamas. The Bahamian authorities have now admitted effectively that they ordered the transfer, it sounds like, of certain FTX assets to wallets under their control after the U.S. bankruptcy was filed. Did you help them with that? Did you discuss that with them?
So I can't discuss specifics, but I will note that prior to Chapter 11 having been filed, the Bahamian authorities had placed FTX Digital Markets, the Bahamian entity, which is the primary operating entity of FTX International, under supervision of a JPL system in the Bahamas with oversight from the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, and were, to my knowledge, taking actions to protect FDM's clients and customers there.
Can we just go back for just
At
one second?
FTM.
I apologize for belaboring this point, but we were
think
talking
it's
about
FTX,
and the
actually.
derivative piece of it earlier. And I had made a note earlier about this because you had told the Senate, so you were sitting in the Senate at the time, on February 9th, 2022, during a hearing, you said, quote, on FTX US derivatives, all of these contracts are fully collateralized. Was that true?
Yes, and again, FTX US, to my knowledge, totally solvent. FTX US derivatives, totally solvent. And in fact, I believe FTX US derivatives, Ledger X, may even be up and running right now. I'm confused why FTX US
It's
is
like
not
shaking.
processing customer withdrawals
Because
right
it
now.
doesn't matter. It's
Should be,
still
because I believe,
FTX.
to my knowledge,
Like
that it could be.
FTX US, FTX International, sure, like they have to like kind of divide it up into like conglomeracy and technicalities and legal reasons, but it's still the same company. We all know this. Kind of like Binance US and Binance. It's still the same thing. Like they're still the same thing. Come on. I don't know why they're trying to separate the two.
And could make all Americans 100% whole from this. So and FTX US derivatives, as I said there, doesn't even allow leverage of any sort. It was close to a spot trading platform. And so, yeah, to my knowledge, all American customers and all American regulated businesses and exchanges here are, I think, at least in terms of client assets, are okay. Obviously, I don't know what's happened with, you can make your own judgments about the enterprise value of those businesses, but.
Over the summer, you paid a $2.5 billion loan to Barry Silbert's Genesis. This was in August. And I was just trying to think through the dynamics of what might have been happening at your firm and was wondering, where did the money come from?
So when you say you did that, I presume that that's Alameda Research that did that? Is that right?
Yes, yeah. That's the case.
So I don't have all of the details there, but my understanding is that, and I don't know exactly what was going on Genesis's side then, I don't know now, but my understanding is I believe Genesis tried to call in a large number of loans from Alameda. I believe that happened, and that closed down a lot of positions that Alameda had open with Genesis and other trading desks. And that was what I was thinking at the time. And that's, I think, what happened there. I also think that may have led to an increase of position size of Alameda on FTX in retrospect.
Right. You did an interview, I think perhaps inadvertently, over Twitter DMs with a reporter at Vox, and had spoken about ESG.
He's like, God, I wish I never did that
Also
interview.
about what you described as the shibboleths of what it meant to look good in corporate America today. And that a lot of the things that you were doing were not necessarily things you actually believed or believed in. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a frustrating series. It was not meant to be a public interview. It was a longtime friend of mine who I stupidly forgot was also a reporter. I thought I was speaking in a personal capacity. I'm not sure what they thought the capacity was at the time, but it certainly ended up being reported on.
She was like a reporting plant, you know. She like seduced him. He slipped up. It's amazing with the power of beauty can just put a chink in that armor.
And I think what I'd say is, look, there are a lot of things that I think have really massive impact on the world, and ultimately that's what I care about the most. And I mean, I think frankly that the blockchain industry could have substantial positive impact, but I was thinking a lot about bed nets and malaria, about saving people from diseases no one should die from, about animal welfare, about pandemic prevention, and what could be done on a large scale to help mitigate those things. I think matter, and they're among the most important things to me. Separately from
Nah, my money matters. I want my money back now. Give me my money, and then we can save the animals. You know what I mean? Like, y'all gotta keep it for real up in here. Keep it real. Keep it G.
that, there's a bunch of bullshit.
See, we like my people. We ain't trying to hear all of that. We want this money. We don't want to. That's crazy. Yeah, just sway the whole audience.
Regulated companies do to try and look good. And these are things that everyone who does them basically knows they're kind of dumb, that these are not things that are making large impact on the world. These are not looking at saving thousands of lives. These are the kind of if like 3 different quarterbacks throw a touchdown in the same game for the same team, we'll donate 2 used cars to charity type campaigns, where it's not going to happen. It's never happened. There's no expectation of a car getting donated. It's just a PR campaign, sort of masquerading as do-gooderism, and things like greenwashing are things which I think end up in a somewhat similar area.
Do-gooderism and greenwashing. That's interesting. Those are interesting terms that he put out. Do-gooderism and greenwashing. Like, just greenwash something just to sound good. That's an interesting term, greenwashing.
Fair to say you participated in this.
Yeah, we all did, and FTX did as well. And there are things I felt like we needed to do for the business. There are things that I felt like were crucial for us being able. I mean, I wish the world didn't work this way. I wish that these weren't relevant to your ability to get regulated, to your ability to get bank accounts, but they were. And we had promotional campaigns, we had marketing slogans.
Yeah, a lot of people marketing on YouTube for FTX. Those people, I wonder if they'll get sued too. I'm sure.
And we thought about what we could do to and we thought of ourselves
And
as
that's another thing. Like, people aren't really suing Sam Bankman-Fried. They're suing some celebrities too for advertising the crap coin and exchange to them.
legitimately trying to do good, but we also thought about what we could do to make sure that our image reflected that. And there's a lot of just unimpactful things there that ultimately I think in some circles got more attention than actually impactful things. And I think that on the more tasteful end of the spectrum, you can see, things like small scale but real charitable initiatives. And on, I think, the less tasteful end of the spectrum, frankly speaking, I mean, I think even things like, making sure that all materials have perfect English grammar is a thing where that was important.
Sam, let me ask you about this, though, because the other piece of it is...
It's like we're talking to like a teenager, actually. He's kind of like, no one, okay, he went to school for like chemistry, right? And then maybe he worked for a firm for like a year or two, and then like on and off job, just making a lot of random money, doing God knows what. And all of a sudden he's in charge of a large financial institution. I don't buy it. But we know about his parents and the connection to the SEC and Gary Gensler, so I'm sure you've all watched that a long time ago, a couple of days ago.
using your money and influence, and I think there's a question about whose money you were using, but to donate, for example, to the Democratic Party, in large part, to influence
I think there may be like alcohol. I don't even drink, so, but I think there's alcohol in there just to like take the edge off just a bit. And look at his face here. Let's take a look really closely. I wish I could get like a zoom in, like. I don't have that feature yet, but look at his face here. It's like, God, when is this interview over? I want to go back and call Caroline.
And I think as people have looked through now some of the regulation you were pushing for at CFIUS, for example, some of that regulation would have allowed you, frankly, to, quote, self-certify a lot of what was going on at FTX. And there are people who look at that and say it was all part of a scheme.
So, I mean, unpacking piece of that, when you look at like the CFTC regulation there, ultimately there may have been an ability to self-certify contracts, but prior to that, we went through a congressional hearing, a public comment period, a public roundtable, a year of inquiries and tens of thousands of hours, thousands of pages of submitted documents, and still had not gotten to the point of having a license to offer emergent futures in the United States. And so it was an extraordinarily long and hard process that we were going through with the CFTC. It was by far the most intensive regulatory process that I'd ever seen.
Can you speak to the lobbying piece of it, though?
Yeah.
And the donations piece of it? Because I think that's become part of this
We
story
want to hear more
as
of
to
that.
whether you effectively were influencing
Donating to the
lawmakers
Democratic
to do your
Party.
bidding. And given the state of your current company, questions about whether that should be the case.
So, I mean, lawmakers were not ruling on FTX. FTX didn't have an application before Congress for anything. My donations were mostly for pandemic prevention, and they were looking at primary elections where there were candidates who were outspoken in favor of doing things now to prevent the next pandemic. That was the primary thing that I was supporting with those contributions. And it was on both sides of the aisle, primarily operating in both primaries because it wasn't I wasn't viewing it as a partisan exercise. I was not, most of this was not looking at donating to one party to beat the other one in the general elections here.
It's
Not only
smiling.
was it on both sides.
And who is he looking at? Like, he's looking at someone to the left and smiling a little bit. I think someone's trying to, like, don't answer those questions. Give them word salad. And this is all word salad right here. Definitely.
But even within each side, it was between two candidates in the same party, and it was looking at pandemic policy.
Where did the money come from for those donations?
So,
Good
basically,
question.
profits. I mean, it was substantially smaller than the amount of trading profits that Alameda had made over the prior few years.
Related to this.
So he was the, what, second largest donor, right under George Soros to the Democratic Party in the previous election. And they had that much money to donate. That's interesting.
You had a meeting with Gary Gensler. You also met with folks at CFIUS. Do you think you needed to buy your way into those meetings?
I mean, I don't think I need to buy my way into them. I do think it was harder than I would have thought it would be to get to the point of being even able to have meetings with some regulators. And I mean, I spent hundreds of hours, probably thousands of hours in DC trying to get to the point where I could even have meetings with some of the relevant regulators. But that wasn't a money thing. And I mean, there's no donations to Gary Gensler's. He doesn't even have a campaign to donate to in the first place. That was like elbow grease. I mean, that was just asking again and again and again to have meetings with relevant regulators and submitting hundreds and thousands of pages of documents.
You also made big investments in a number of media companies. And I think that's raised a lot of questions about whether you were trying to buy influence.
I didn't know that.
I mean, I think media matters a lot, and I want to support good media ventures. That was the whole thesis there. And, I don't have like governance over any of these. I wasn't looking for governance over them. I was looking to support journalists doing great work because I think what they do is really important, and I think that there needs to be a critical eye on stories. I'm certainly seeing, being on getting the brunt of a lot of that right now, and frankly, I think it's healthy for the world that there is real investigative journalism.
Your parents are law professors. What did you tell them when all of this happened?
I mean, I don't remember exactly when I reached out to them, but I think I called them up and said, "Hey guys, I think there might be a problem. Like things."
This is really interesting too, because it's like he's like and he acts like a teenager, right? And then everyone that's always like, "Oh, your parents. Like, what do your parents think? Or you're living with your parents?" They didn't say that to like Bernie Madoff and like, oh, like, that's just interesting, like that dynamic, how like society sees him as like a teenager, like under the supervision of his parents. Like I see the connection there for sure. But it's just interesting, the whole parent element to this.
It looks like Alameda's position might be imploding here, and there might be liquidity issues, and I'll tell you more when I know more. That's my guess about roughly what I said, but honestly, that week so much happened, it's a little bit of a blur to me exactly what was said.
And what are they telling you now?
And look, it's been a hard period for anyone who was close to me, and none of them deserved that. And I feel really, I mean, look, like a lot of obviously,
Oh, he's feeling shame. Oh, he didn't want to upset his parents. Well, too bad. You need to pay give us our money, yo. This sympathy ain't gonna work on me. I'm sorry. Y'all can eat it up if you want and feel some type of way, but I'm aware of like the ethos and pathos and logos of certain, I've had a classical education, okay? So like this is all BS right here.
the, the largest number of people who were hurt here were customers, and I feel incredibly bad about that. But anyone who was close to me, including my parents, including employees, coworkers who fought with the company to push forward, were hurt by this and bore no responsibility for that. I feel really bad about that, and I mean, I feel really grateful for the support that my parents are still giving me, throughout all of this.
Can you explain the real estate piece of this to us? I think there's been a number of headlines, as you know, about FTX, the company, buying a lot of real estate up in the Bahamas. Where you lived, at least at the time, was owned by the company. But then there's also reports that your parents signed and were effectively provided with what seemed like a vacation home.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, that's why I don't feel any sympathy. Like, it's so hard. Like, it's hard to feel sympathy for these people. Like, it's just so hard. Like, they're up in the echelons of, government, like, elite deep state society. And it's like, oh, you guys know what you're doing. You're RICOing and you're living off the benefits of your customers. Like, I mean, which is, like, hey, you could have done that if you didn't steal all the money. Like, really? Or like, it's crazy. Well, that money never really existed because those tokens were fake anyway. So
I don't know the details of that house for my parents, but I know that it was not intended to be their long-term property. I know it was intended to be the company's property. I don't know how that was papered, and I think that was where it was.
that's the whole point. Trust me, they
don't
were gonna trust me, they knew what they were doing. They were gonna go through this process, lower you up, pay some fees, and bam, there you go. It's not that hard. They got their lawyers, they got their financiers, and their real estaters. They could have done this easily if this didn't go down.
may have stayed there while working, with the company sometime over the last year. When you look at the rest of it, there were a lot of property purchases in the Bahamas. The reason for that is we had, 100, basically 100 Silicon Valley, top Silicon Valley employees come down here to work for FTX, and we were trying to incentivize that and to, make sure that they had an easy way to find a comfortable life.
Too
so
comfortable.
And
handling all that money.
So,
that's why they should have been in the U.S., New York, or Silicon Valley. They should have been doing all of this within the U.S. anyway. They were working through the Bahamas, and this is just so. Someone should be in jail. I hope you people realize this. Y'all are getting gamed so well. I mean, some people would disagree, but overall, the general public getting gamed, and he's just gonna get away with it. That's what it sounds like.
People put together here did end up, buying a substantial amount of property, and I feel bad about some of how those investments may turn out for them.
Can you just speak to the idea of this company that, at least from the public perspective, seemed like a regulated company or something that was very focused on compliance? You would go to Washington, you talk about compliance, you talk about trust. Crypto ultimately is actually about trust. It's about not having to trust others, frankly. It's supposed to be a trustless system. That's why you trust trust it so much, supposedly. But it seems like when you read the stories, It sounds like a bunch of kids
Yeah,
who were on Adderall having a sleepover party.
yeah, basically.
I mean,
That's what it was.
look,
That's what
you
it
know,
was.
like,
That's what these privileged people do. Like if you're privileged, then you don't have to work a 9 to 5. You can work maybe like I don't know 5 or 4 hours out of the day and take the rest of the day off. Go to the beach, go work out, have a nice little lunch, hang out with a friend, play tennis, and then get back to the office and just catch up on the metrics and see where things are going. Oh, it's looking all right. Let's stay here for like 2 hours and then let's go and do some Adderall and just have a good time. And you know what Adderall does to you too. It is an amphetamine and a stimulant, and they're all working close together in close proximity. Like, yeah.
I was CEO. I was the CEO of FTX. And I mean, I'd say this again and again, that means I had a responsibility. That means that I was responsible ultimately.
This is interesting because, like, the amount of privilege that I'm witnessing here is mind blowing. I mean, it's not mind blowing, but like, this is on public display connected to institutions, and it's like, if this for like a black dude, like, I hate to say it, but oh man, it wouldn't be the tone would not be like this.
For us doing the right things. And I mean, we didn't. Like, we messed up big.
But there were people, though, who were telling you needed more
Like,
compliance.
We messed up big, yeah.
There were, but I think that
I don't think he really understands the gravity of it. He's just kind of like technically, like, he's done so many, like, allegedly, like, stimulants and mind enhancing supplements. And the trick with mind enhancing supplements is that some of those actually alter your brain, meaning that it will have to like kill certain proteins in your brain, destroy them, and then create new proteins or amino acids that help bridge those neurons in a certain way to make a more enhanced capacity. Thus, you can never really get back to your original state. So you become like this, like, burnout robot if you take it long enough. Like, and it's hard to control. That's what I've heard. But let's keep going.
compliance, we were spending an enormous amount of our energy on compliance. We were spending an enormous amount of our energy on regulation, on licensure. We were getting licensed in dozens of jurisdictions. I think, frankly, we were spending probably too much of our energy getting licensed in retrospect.
Shaking.
There were some places where I think that the reporting and transparency obligations from that licensure actually did help. I think when you look at, FTX US derivatives, I think when you look at FTX Japan, which I think is fully solvent, which I think could make all customers whole tomorrow if it were, the sort of relevant teams were to allow it to, and confused why it hasn't. I think that a lot of what we ended up doing and focusing on was a distraction to some extent from one.
And it's interesting, I think. Let's also take a look at, he's doing word salad right now. But I'm also looking at the background here. It's kind of like a stage setup with a painting and then a little plant and there's chairs in the corner of like a room. So, and notice they're not going to show like a nice, luxury modern place, like the water flowing and the sun shining behind them, you know what I mean? The most they're going to have is this plant. So they don't want to disclose exactly where he is too, which is interesting. Like they're definitely protecting him for sure. Like this, he could be, and he also could be in a dark trailer room, like a dark trailer type of room where it's just staged and you walk out and it's like in the middle of like nowhere. You know what I mean? Like very MK Ultra feeling. So
Important area that we completely failed on, and that was risk. That was risk management. That was, customer position risk, and frankly, conflict of interest risk. And there was no person who was chiefly in charge of positional risk of customers on FTX. And that feels pretty embarrassing in retrospect, because that was, you go back to 2019, even 2018 asked me, why am I starting to build out FTX? What's the point of it? And what I would have said was, look, the existing crypto derivatives exchanges have large risk management failures, that every day there are millions of dollars that are being lost by customers because of risk management failures, that these contracts are paying out 75 cents on the dollar week after week after week because of risk management blowouts, and that needs to be overhauled. And that was what I was focused on for the beginning of FTX. I was not focused on that for the last year or two. I got less grounded from that, and I started focusing on the bigger picture, on future business avenues, on licensure, on a lot of things. And I mean, we lost track of a really important part of the business and of the product. And so there absolutely were management failures, huge management failures. I bear responsibility for that. There were oversight failures, transparency failures, reporting, like so many things we should have had in place. I think that a lot of it was on the risk management side.
Let me ask you about that, which is, we had Larry Fink here today, and he had a stake in FTX. And Sequoia and Paradigm and some very big venture capital firms had given you money. And I'm curious if they ever asked you questions about this risk management and whether they bear any responsibility for what clearly now appears, and you're saying, was at minimum a lack of
he's
oversight, if
shaking.
not something much
Yeah,
worse.
like that's fishy too when you have.
I don't think they bear responsibility. I mean, like when you look at, you put yourself in the eyes of an investor, of a venture capital firm. What you're thinking about primarily is upside, right? What you're thinking about primarily is investing in a private company and thinking, might this 3x, might this 5x, might this even 10x on the upside cases? And yeah, there's some chance that it will go down. There's some chance that maybe it will go down to zero. But that's counterbalanced by the upside propositions here. And so most of what they were focused on was, I think like, what might FTX become? What's the pathway to get from here to there? What would it take?
Check the
What are
price
the
of
missing
Bitcoin.
pieces? Rather than, at the point where you're dwelling on all of the various precise downside scenarios and risks for a prospective venture investment, that means you're not investing. Like if that's where your head's at, if you think the odds are that that's where things are going to end up, why would you do that investment?
Can I ask you about the drugs? You have tweeted about
Looks
it.
like a
Caroline has tweeted
rollover.
about it. Others have tweeted about uppers and downers and all sorts of things. There have been pictures taken of something called MSAM, which apparently increases levels of dopamine to the brain. It's actually for Parkinson's. Were you taking that as a patch?
So it's
I actually
funny,
can't
because
believe they're
I had my
asking
first sip
that.
of alcohol after my 21st birthday, and I think I have maybe half a glass of alcohol a year, roughly speaking. There were no.
I feel like I'm watching like Amber Heard talking about how much wine she drinks. It's wild. Like these people are just like out. Like
Wild parties here. When we had parties, we'd play board games, and 20% of people would have 3/4 of a beer each, or something like that, and the rest of us would not drink anything. I see, any illegal drug use around me, at the office, at these parties, like, and when I say parties there, I mean, like, having people over for dinner is what that meant. And look, I can't talk about anyone else, like, what they're prescribed between themselves and their doctors or
He looks
psychiatrists.
down a lot here because he's definitely ashamed of this aspect of the story. And I don't know. We'll see how deep it goes. I don't think it won't go any deeper than that, you know.
I can say for me, I don't know, like I've been prescribed various things at various times to help with focus and concentration. And I think they have done that. I haven't felt any of,
Of course.
the sort of impacts that I think people have been theorizing here from it. And it's not a
Damn, maybe I need some of these drugs because, sure, if you can just sway the whole masses and have the whole world not just put you in jail, damn, that's some major mind magic on them joints. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's wild.
huge impact, in the first place. Anyway, I think, these have all just been totally on-label use of medications, and I think things that on the margin help me focus a little bit. I wish I had.
And it's really terrible because in American society, a lot of these people, that do crypto and, like kind of live on the fringes, a lot of them have to, go to work and, they got to be 100% sober and get drug tested. You have to be drug tested for many good paying jobs out there. Whereas, this guy, like they should start drug testing and like upper corporate more, but they don't really do that much, do they? That's wild. That's ridiculous.
Focused over the last year.
I may have been unfocused in this last moment because I actually wanted to follow up on the question when we're talking about venture capitalists.
Yep.
Sequoia and Paradigm invested in you, but there have now been questions about the fact that you invested in them and whether these were what some people describe in the business round-trip deals. Can you speak to that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Well, what you want to do is look at the owners. This isn't hard. This isn't hard. You guys know. Just look at the owners of this investment firm and see who they are. See who they are. Look into them. See like if there's any like commonality between them and Sam.
they had invested in FTX. I don't know the details, but I think there may have been a small investment into some of their funds. I think, it was something that we did because we believed in what they were doing. It seemed like a good opportunity, and didn't think too much about it.
I'm curious, just on a very personal level, as we get close to ending this conversation, to the degree that there's been a lesson in this and that what you see as your future at this point. I know you're taking it day to day, obviously. And I know you're an optimist as well. We've talked about that.
Wrapping up, thank God.
But what do you think realistically is your future?
So, what is my future?
Yeah. Actually, his future is I either want to see him in jail or just completely be out of the public eye. We no longer want to see you doing any dealings with regulations, crypto, finance. Like, you can become a spokesperson for like Bitcoin Cash or even Ethereum if you want. But I think you've lost all respect. You don't have a future.
What my far future is. And, when you fast forward, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing, a long time from now. I think when I look at...
I'll tell you one thing. He'll have money. He'll have money and probably still in the Bahamas or some other tropical place. But as well. He'll be alright. He'll be good. He'll be better than the people that lost their money. Wow.
You know what? The near and medium term. What am I thinking? What I'm thinking is, and again, I don't know what's going to happen, a lot of it's not in my hands at this point. But I want to be helpful wherever I can to regulators, administrators, internationally who are working to, to help FTX's customers. And I want to be helpful wherever I can on anything that could help bring a lot more value to those customers. And, I don't know where that will lead. I can say that prior to filing, there had been a lot of interest in financing, a lot of fairly strong interest, many billions of dollars worth. I don't, I can't make any promises about anything, but I would have thought that there would be, a chance for a pathway forward here that would bring more.
There's no
value
pathway forward. This was a major institutional rug pull on crypto customers, a big rug pull. Like S-Coin did better than this. Like, it's crazy.
Happen if you just sort of sold everything off for for scraps. And I don't have confidence. I can't promise you, and I can't promise anyone anything there, and it's not really in my hands.
Yeah, I'm not feeling sympathy.
But I would think that it would make sense to be exploring that, because I think there's a chance that customers could end up made a lot more whole, I don't know, maybe even fully whole, if there was a really
selling hope
effort.
How would that happen?
Yeah, how?
So, there have been examples of this before in crypto history where that happened.
Mt. Gox.
Obviously, you can look at what happened with Bitfinex back a number of years ago, where it got hacked and then ended up making, over a few year period, customers whole. There are a lot of assets that are on hand here, although many of them are not liquid. They were worth quite a bit more than the needed liabilities a month ago, even, let alone a year ago. There's at least a month ago, there were, or I guess, 3 weeks ago, billions of dollars of potential funding opportunities. I don't know that it would have been great for my stake as a shareholder of FTX, but that's not what matters here. And I think it would have brought more financing to customers. You saw, obviously, the Tron facility, which is open for a little while on FTX, which allowed some customers to get liquidity. You put some of these together. There's obviously, equity in the business. Where does that lead? I don't know exactly. And again, it's not going to be my, decision to make at the end of the day. But I think there's a shot for real value.
Sam, we're going to have to wrap up. And just quick other questions. One is, given what you know about compliance or the lack of it in this business, in this industry, I think there are a lot of people who are holding crypto today, perhaps on exchanges like Binance and other places.
Yep.
What should they think, given what you do know, and to the extent that you can tell us the truth about what you know?
What should they think? And I presume you're asking, what should they think about the safety of their assets going forward? And
correct.
Yeah. So look, I obviously don't know exactly what's going on at other exchanges. I can tell you what I would think as a customer, if I were a customer here, which is look for the things that I wish FTX had been able to supply. Things like, proof of reserves is helpful. Look for as rigorous of that as you can. Look for regulatory reporting, right? You look at what the JFSA had in place in Japan. You look at what FTX US derivatives had with, sort of frequent reporting to regulators of exactly what, customer assets, balances, liabilities, distributions are.
What about the governance piece?
Yeah.
What about the governance piece? Because one of the things we have not talked about is you had no board, and you had no CFO. And that should have been a red flag, frankly, for all of us.
Yeah, yeah, that's like, when you look up a project in crypto, you want to look at the team and see what the whole team is. Apparently it's just SBF and just the Caroline side girl. That's all I know.
Interestingly, in some ways, we had too many boards. We had.
Oh, goodness. Hopefully we're going to get him back in just a moment, if we can. Thank you for
That's
indulging us.
interesting.
We are almost finished with this interview. Are we going to get him
That's
back?
awkward. I thought that was my computer.
Hang tight just for 1 second, if we could. Can we try to bring Sam back? You said you thought you had too many boards.
Yeah.
Okay.
And can you hear me here?
Yep, we can all hear you.
Yep. Cool. So we didn't talk about much, but there is a board of FTX Japan. There's a board of FTX US derivatives, FTX Australia, FTX Singapore, FTX Europe. We had, I think, more than a dozen boards when you look at all of the entities put together. And many of these boards had regulatory functions. I think the problem to some extent was, okay, sure, you have all these boards, but at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, who's the person who's in charge of global or the board or the function that's in charge of global site customer risk management? There's a diffusion of responsibility to some extent on that front, and there needed to be, I think, a single or a small set of entities, whether of boards, people, of responsible parties that were sitting there saying, I feel responsible for what happens on FTX. And we had actually audited financials. From the FTX finances perspective, we
Word
had
salad.
structure, but from the customer risk and finances perspective, much less.
Sam, how much money do you have left at this point?
A lot.
To my knowledge, close to nothing. I mean,
What does that
basically
mean?
everything was just in the companies. I mean, it's
So, if he has no money, how is he able to stay in the Bahamas and a penthouse? Who's paying his life bill? Who's paying his food? How is he getting around? Where is he getting the financial support from? I hope he asks that. That's the real question.
Waste some
unless-
money somewhere?
no. I don't have any hidden funds.
I love
here.
how you asked that.
Everything I have, I'm disclosing, and I'm down to I think I have one working credit card left. I think it might be $100,000 or something like that in that bank account. Everything that I had, even all the loans I had were those those are all things I was reinvesting in the businesses that I'd put everything I had into FTX.
I want to ask you two final questions. Were you truthful with us today?
He
was
looked to the
truthful
left.
as I'm knowledgeable to be. There's some things I wish I knew more about, but yes, I was.
So let me ask you this. Do you agree that over time you also lied?
Do I agree that I lied?
Yeah.
I don't know of times when I lied. I think, look, there are certainly times when I was acting as a representative, as a marketer for FTX, and when I was looking for how can I, in a way which is truthful, but paint FTX as compelling a way as possible, as exciting and optimistic a way as possible, and I wasn't thinking.
And that's another thing. He's doing worse salad right now. But Andrew asked him a basic yes and no question. That's another tactic people do. You ask a yes and no question, but then you come back with a whole paragraph. You don't actually say yes or no.
I wasn't talking about what are the
Good
risks
manipulation.
involved with FTX.
His
there.
brain is definitely
I
enhancedly
obviously was
working.
there, spent more time dwelling on the downsides and less time thinking about the upsides.
Sam Bankman-Fried.
But you know what overpowers the brain sometimes? An enhanced brain? Human instinct. And we all know this dude is a shark. Totally.
For this interview, I hope that some of the answers have been helpful as we've tried to understand and untangle what is a still tangled story. Sam, I know that this has been a
More
difficult conversation.
questions
And a tough
than
conversation.
answers.
And on behalf of everybody here and on behalf of the public, I want to thank you for engaging in it at a time, in truth, when I know you've been advised not to. So thank you so very, very much. Thank you.
Yeah, he had to. Well, that was interesting. So, thank you for my reaction and psychoanalysis and body language analysis of Sam Bankman-Fried, and we will see how it continues in the future to come. And please give a like and subscribe, and definitely comment all you want, because I noticed on the main video they turned the comment section off, but it's getting a lot of thumbs down, that's for sure. But you guys have a good one, and I'll see you later. Bye.